Sean Diddy Combs is about to face off in the biggest trial of his life, from those freak-offs to those RICO charges. There's a lot going on in this case, and a lot of witnesses will also be taking the stand. But here to break down the very latest, I want to bring into the conversation legal analyst Neama Rahmani. Neama, thanks so much for being with us here on LiveNOW from Fox.
Of course, Christina, excited for next week.
And it's been a trial that we've been continuing to follow here over the last few months and really over the last year as those developments have still tried to come into our newsroom. But let's start with the very basics. Something that came out this week. Diddy formally declined the last plea deal that he was offered. Again, we know court is set to begin on Monday. Was this an expected move for him to turn down that final plea offer?
Christina, it was expected. And the judge in the case, Judge Subramanian, asked Diddy, did you decline and reject the government's offer? And the reason is it's the defendant's right to a speedy trial, and the judge wants to make sure that he is making a knowing and voluntary decision to push the case to trial, because obviously there's a benefit to pleading. Usually you get a reduced sentence. I still think it would be double-digit years in federal prison under any plea deal. Obviously, the judge and the parties did not disclose the terms of that offer, but I can't see the government giving a huge discount in this case. Now, that being said, Christina, if and when Combs is convicted, he may be looking at decades in federal prison. Judges tend not to give much of a discount or leniency when defendants like this push their case to trial, and very serious federal charges like sex trafficking and racketeering are proven beyond a reasonable doubt to a jury. And it is in his mid-50s. I believe he's 55. And if he is convicted, he may end up spending the rest of his life in federal prison.
And it'll be interesting to watch here. And before we jump into the jury selection aspect, I want to talk about what we're going to be expecting to see Diddy wear in court. This has been one of those conversations that's happening. He's allowed to wear up to 5 button-down shirts, pants, sweaters, socks, and shoes without any laces in the courtroom. So he's not going to be there in his normal jail uniform that he's grown, I'm sure, quite accustomed to over the last few months. Is that going to be important for how the jurors see him when they're standing there in court? He'll be wearing regular clothing, not, again, some of those jumpsuits that they wear while behind bars.
Christina, that's expected, and defense lawyers routinely make this motion for their clients to wear civilian clothes because the prison garb is pretty prejudicial, and jurors see someone in that orange jumpsuit and they assume that he's a criminal. Obviously, we have a presumption of innocence in this country. That presumption can be overcome at trial. I do think the government will be able to overcome that trial, but defense lawyers routinely make this motion. It's routinely granted. You see even accused mass murderers in civilian clothing, suits, button-up shirts, and the like at trial. Obviously, there'll be marshals there to make sure everyone's protected, but this is something that I expected when the defense made the motion, and I don't think the government really had a good basis to object to it.
And again, that jury selection process has been underway. It was an original pool of 600 jurors that they now have to whittle down to just 12 with 6 alternates as well. Okay, let's talk about that process a little bit. What kind of goes on behind the scenes, and how difficult is it truly to get 600 jurors down to just 12?
Christina, they call it jury selection, but really it should be called jury deselection. So the judge goes first, and he's going to ask questions of the potential jurors, and he's going to remove any that he believes can't be fair and impartial. Then the parties get to ask their own questions. So you see the lawyers get up there, talk to the jurors about their views on sexual assault, physical violence. Have they ever been victims of a crime? Then the parties get to use their own strikes. These are called peremptories. The lawyers will strike jurors, and they can strike jurors for any reason or no reason at all, as long as it's not a constitutionally prohibited reason like race, religion, national origin. So combine those with the 4 cause challenges. Those are the jurors who are removed because they can't be impartial, plus the peremptories, which are the discretionary strikes. The 12 jurors that remain, those are the 12 jurors in the case. So they weren't selected, but they weren't stricken by the judge or the lawyers. And of course, with a long case like this, I wouldn't be surprised if we have 5 or 6 alternates, because the last thing you want to do is to start a trial over because you run out of jurors.
And again, it's so hard with this case. I would have to ask you, Neema, from what I perceive, because Diddy is a celebrity, a massive celebrity who's had influence for the last several decades in the music industry and beyond. How difficult is it going to be to find impartial jurors who don't have an opinion already on the music mogul?
It'll be difficult, Christina, and this is probably the biggest celebrity case, I think, maybe since Johnny Depp, probably going back to OJ. I mean, this is just such a huge case. And, one issue is Diddy is so big that it doesn't matter if you move the trial from New York City to some other part of the state or even some other part of the country. Everyone in the world knows who Sean Combs is. Everyone's seen the video from 2016 of him seemingly beating ex girlfriend Cassie Ventura. Everyone has a view on this case already. There's not a juror in the entire country that hasn't heard something. So the judge is going to have to ask them to set all that aside and decide the case solely based on the facts and evidence and what they hear in that courtroom.
Do you think we'll hear from Cassie during this trial? Do you think she'll actually get up on the witness stand?
Christina, I do. Cassie is going to be the government's star witness. She is victim one. She was the person who was named originally in the first indictment. Obviously, we've seen some new iterations to superseding indictments since then, but Cassie Ventura started this whole thing. Let's not forget, November 2023, New York State had opened the statute of limitations to file a civil lawsuit for some of these claims, and she was in negotiations with Combs in terms of a settlement. Reportedly, she wanted 20 or 30 million. He offered only 10 million, and she was up against the clock, so she filed a lawsuit. It was a bombshell lawsuit. I mean, the allegations were salacious. Combs settled it the next day, but at that point, it was too late. It was a publicly filed document, and it really opened the door. Victim after victim came forward. They alleged similar stories of physical and sexual violence in these freak-offs, guns, violence, drugs. And then the government started investigating and they picked up the case for criminal prosecution, of course, after Combs's homes in LA and Miami were raided. So she is the reason this case is happening. And if he's convicted, and I expect him to be convicted, I do believe it will be because of Cassie Ventura. They were dating for more than a decade. She knows where the bodies are buried, and she's going to come out and she's going to testify. And importantly, Christina, unlike some other victims, she's going to testify using her name. She hasn't asked to remain anonymous. So I think that's important as well.
And it's going to be something that we're continuing to watch here on Live Now from Fox. I think you summed it up perfectly there. That lawsuit that started it all of the allegations ending with Sean Diddy Combs behind bars, now facing these very serious federal charges. We appreciate you, legal analyst Neama Rahmani, always helpful in breaking down some of these court cases.
Of course, Christina, have a great weekend, and I'm sure we'll be talking a lot more about this case
I'm sure
next
we
week.
will. I'm sure we will.